verses 29 through 31. Then I said to you, do not be shocked, nor fear them. The Lord your God, who goes before you, will himself fight on your behalf, just as he did for you in Egypt before your eyes, and in the wilderness where you saw how the Lord your God carried you, just as a man carries his son, in all the way which you have walked until you came to this place.
Well, I want to wish everybody a happy Father's Day. For a minute, I thought I was going to have to talk louder than the annual Father's Day tree felling that was going across the street, but we'll see how that goes. But very seriously, I do hope everybody has a really great day. I bet you some of you are going out to eat and maybe get a steak or go home and relax, but it's nice to have a day that's set aside to honor fathers. It affects everyone here in one way or another. All of us have had a father who influenced them, or someone like a father. I think that's important to keep in mind too, that I bet you a lot of us have had people in our lives that have been a father in a figurative sense and have played a pretty key role in our lives. And I imagine those specific men come to mind on this day. I came across this. Someone asked a little boy, "What is Father's Day?" And the little kid said, "It's just like Mother's Day, only you don't spend as much." I thought that was pretty good. I also came across, as far as I know, this is how Father's Day began. I didn't know this. I guess once upon a time there was just Mother's Day for quite a while. But in 1910, a woman named Sonora Dodd, she lived in Spokane, Washington, and she was actually sitting in a church service on Mother's Day. And she was sitting there, and somebody was up giving a lesson about moms. And she immediately started thinking of her father, because her mom had passed away when she was very little, and her father had raised Sonora and her siblings on his own. And she got to thinking, I really appreciate my father too. And so she kind of made mention of it. And so the first Father's Day took place on the third Sunday in June in Washington, because it happened to be her father's birthday. I guess it was Sonora's father's birthday in June. That's how it ended up that way. It became official 56 years later. 1966, President Johnson made it official. Third Sunday in June, Father's Day. That's why that's happening today, is because of this woman, Sonora, thinking about her family, and in particular her father who raised her and her brothers and sisters. There's going to be a variety of activities today. Maybe some restaurants, maybe some gifts. But at least for a moment, we're going to take some time as Christians this morning and think about our dads, our fathers, or people who are kind of in that position for us. There's various things that you admire about this person or persons that you're thinking about, certain qualities. No matter what, I bet you could find certain things that stand out and say, that was kind of a snapshot in my mind that represents the fatherly nature of that particular person, certain qualities that we associate with fathers. Psalm 103:13, wanted to find some verses that specifically talk about dads, and I like this one. It talks about, and we'll come back again to it later, but it says a father has compassion on his children. Kind of important to keep in mind that a father is typically the strongest, most physically strong person in the household, but he's kind of defined by his compassion towards his children. And I like that idea. We might think about the compassion of the father figure in your life, or your father, maybe some good memories in that regard. But I got to thinking about this as, of course, preparing what I want to share with you. And, let's be honest, a lot of people's memories about their dad are not all going to be good. There's a lot of people today who are thinking Father's Day, and there's kind of a twinge of things that weren't perfect. There's a lot of people who didn't have good fathers. I want to be upfront about that. I think it's important for us to cover everything. There's a lot of great fathers. I know you know that, but the sad truth is there's many not so great fathers. In fact, someone suggested to people, this kind of startled me, and I understood his point. He suggested that one of the best things you can do on Father's Day for fathers and for themselves, forgive them. I thought that was worth noticing. Some fathers disappear. Some fathers are distant or even worse, and I'm still getting used to the idea of being a father. It's kind of, even the little that I've experienced. Sarah and I have talked. Just like with our first baby, this baby is obviously affecting her, not me that much. She has to deal with it much more than me. Pretty easy for me as the dad to just kind of get distracted, and every once in a while I say, oh yeah, there's a baby on the way. I'm a father. And even after the baby's born, fathers have a tendency to not really be engaged. It's kind of just standard procedure for a lot of us. I read a story about this guy. One particular father, his wife walked in to the nursery one night and saw her husband standing over the crib. And she kind of stopped at the door, and she didn't say anything. She just watched him for a minute, and she saw all kinds of emotions on his face. Disbelief and doubt and delight and amazement. And she was very moved that he was so moved. And she was kind of tearful, and she kind of moved into the room and put her arm around him and said, what are you thinking? He said, it's amazing. I just can't believe anybody could make a crib as good as this for $46. So I know, and I'm kind of bracing myself, and I know I'm not going to get it right, and I know that fathers tend to be like that. I'm kind of trying to brace myself to not be clueless, to not be out of it like that, because I know that's kind of the natural setting for a lot of fathers. It's easy to become the guy who just isn't fully tuned in. Males in general can become like that. We all know there are lots of bad fathers, but there's many great ones. There's a lot of great ones. But I would argue we're more likely to find, for the most part, something kind of in between. You're more likely to find so-so fathers. I thought I'd also, if you don't mind, I'll share another story that I read about. It's 3 children wanted a puppy, because children never want puppies, but these 3 children were pretty determined to have a puppy, and mom didn't like the idea because she knew, like a lot of moms, she would end up taking care of the dog herself. It'd be a novelty for a while, and then it would be up to her to make sure everything was handled. And she told her kids this, and the children promised they would take care of it. We promise we'll feed it and wash it and so on. They're so determined, her 3 kids, she finally gave in. And they brought the puppy home, and they named him Danny. And they did great at taking care of the puppy. This puppy named Danny at first. And then little by little, mom ended up taking care of this dog, just more and more. So one day she decided to teach her children a lesson, and she started looking for a new home for Danny, and she found a good home without telling them. And then she told the kids, she arranged it all. She said, I've found a new home for Danny. And they didn't react like she expected. They reacted a lot more calm than she thought they would. They didn't protest at all. And one of the kids even said, well, we'll miss him. And their mom said, I'm sure we will, but he's too much work for one person. And since I'm the one that has to do all the work, I say he goes. And one of the kids finally spoke up and said, well, if he wouldn't eat so much and wouldn't be so messy, could we keep him? She didn't budge. She says, it's time for Danny to be in a new home. And suddenly all the kids were very upset. They were in tears, and they said, not Danny. We thought you said Daddy. So, I'm sorry to spend too much time on stories, and I know it's just poking fun, but on the more serious side of that, there is kind of an image of fathers in our society that doesn't help. This won't come as any surprise. TV in particular presents dads as fools. Grown-ups in general, but in particular they focus on the dad as kind of the bumbling fool who's just completely out of it. And that does a lot of damage. There was an old show called Father Knows Best. If they really were honest, they'd name a lot of shows today, Father Knows Nothing. And that's how he's treated. Our society laughs at the idea, and many times fathers are shown with no respect at all. They're kind of shrugged aside as irrelevant, just kind of shrugging their shoulders, wandering around the house, not knowing what's going on. Just like we would show respect to the position of an elder, just for the position or the role of a wife and mother, respect should be shown for the position of father. It's a position that men aspire to. Whether or not they achieve it perfectly It is the position that is aspired to, and to sabotage that image discourages men from striving for it, and that's not a good thing. It's easy to look for flaws. It's so easy to sit back and be the person looking for holes and things, just pointing it out. It's easy to find out what's wrong. But I want to take a moment to see what's right, to see what fathers should aspire to be. I really like this one. Someone once said, a father is a man who carries pictures in his wallet where his money used to be. And that says a lot. It kind of makes me laugh, and it makes me realize that that's about right. Even though it's a joke, it presents an image of a father willing to make sacrifices for those he loves, and he carries those pictures in his wallet. That's something to aspire to, and I think we've all known fathers who are selfless and generous. I really like this. A teacher asked her kids the same question. One little boy gave her a pretty interesting answer. She said, "What's the nicest thing your father ever did for you?" And this little boy said, "He married my mother." And I really like that. That's something else to aspire to. It's one of the best things a father can do is to love his children's mother. Ephesians 5:25 puts it this way. I don't know if you appreciate the strong terms that are used in this passage. Ephesians 5 and verse 25. We kind of breeze through these verses as requirements, but there's something being spelled out here that's so significant. Husbands, love your wives. And then it gives us parallel, this comparison. Just as Christ also loved the church. It's that level. And gave himself up for her. There's no higher level of love than the way that a husband is to love his wife. That a dad is supposed to love the mom. God clearly held the position in high regard. In fact, I don't know if you ever considered it from this angle, among all the concepts that God could have chosen from, all the connections, all the various kinds of relationships that God had to choose from, when it was time to explain to us what he is to us, he chose Father. He often compares himself to other things like shepherd, even some mother-like characteristics. But almost always, he describes the connection between you and him. He says, I'm the Father. The world may look down its nose and might ridicule and treat this with disdain. I find it somewhat hypocritical that the world today will say, oh, great, we love fathers, and then tomorrow it will be business as usual, making fun of them. But the world may look down their nose at the position of father, but our Creator holds the position of father in the highest regard. God put the father in charge. That's one thing about a father. That's something all fathers should aspire to. A father is a protector. He's a protector of souls, not just the bodies, but especially the souls. And God made it clear that each home was to be filled with the Word. If you look at Deuteronomy 6, starting with verse 6, notice these instructions. It's kind of like a security system. It's indirectly addressing the fathers about how the household should be. And it's not, when we read this, don't make the mistake of thinking, okay, it has to be kind of this superficial, Bible-oriented home. It's just part of everyday life. Deuteronomy 6, verse 6, these words, which I am commanding you today, shall be on your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your sons, and shall talk of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise up. You shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontals on your forehead. You shall write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. In other words, a dad is going to be into his Bible, and that way stuff comes up. He doesn't quote Scripture. He's not going to pause and say, you know, son, just as it says in John 14:6, it's not going to be like that. You say, you know what? Let's think about how to handle these things, and his knowledge and his wisdom will be there because the Word is in his heart and his mind, and his children will benefit from that. This is the job of the father. He doesn't just bring home physical food, he brings home spiritual food, because there's more than one way to starve to death. He makes sure the family doesn't go hungry physically or spiritually. And of course, a father guides and shapes his children. Back to Ephesians 6, verse 4. You've probably heard this again. Ephesians 6, verse 4 says, fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. Father doesn't just leave children to spiritually flounder on their own, but he doesn't provoke them. It's all about guiding them towards God. Using spiritual food helps them to do better with their lives. A father protects his home. Joshua was a father who protected his home. Remember Joshua 24? There's one particular part of this passage we focus on, but I think it helps to read some of the other passages around it. Joshua 24, I'm going to start with verse 14. And keep in mind, this is a dad talking about his house, his home, his family. And it's kind of in your face, and I think that's why people like this. Joshua 24:14. Now therefore fear the Lord and serve him in sincerity and truth, and put away the gods which your fathers served beyond the river. Notice those fathers weren't so great in their guidance. Which your fathers served beyond the river and in Egypt, and serve the Lord. If it is disagreeable in your sight to serve the Lord, choose for yourselves today whom you will serve, whether the gods which your fathers served, which were beyond the river, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you are living. And then I love this, and you do too. But as for me and my house, as for this dad, we will serve the Lord. One image I have of fathers, and maybe when you have too, I think this is what I think of sometimes when I think about a dad. He's the guy who locks up at night. He's the one who goes around, and I say that and I have dropped the ball. Sometimes I'll get up in the morning and say, wow, that was unlocked all night. So I'm getting better at that. But I think the perfect scenario is the dad is the one who goes around and say, the house is secure. This door is locked. And the reason he's doing that is to make sure everyone's safe. 1 Corinthians 16:13, I think, applies to this concept. 1 Corinthians 16, verse 13. Be on the alert. In other words, watch out. Stand firm in the faith. Act like men. Be strong. Kind of a sloppy way of saying it, but you hear people today say, man up. Act like men. Be strong. It's one thing to do that for physical dangers, but it's a whole different thing and much more admirable to handle the spiritual dangers as well, because those are much more devastating. So I think a father does that too. He locks the physical doors, but there are also other doors that he'll lock for the same reason, for the protection of the family. He's not in this household. He's going to make those decisions. Certain things will not be allowed into his home because he's protecting those that he loves. If I don't know, if for some reason there was a father convention or something downtown and I got the chance to speak to him, so okay, you get to talk for 15 minutes to some fathers. There's going to be 1,000 fathers there, and they're all going to be dads. And I was able to present these things to them. I think one or two thoughts would go through every man there. They would think, I wish my dad had been that kind of father. Or they would think, I wish I was that kind of father. Nobody, not one of them, would say, yep, my dad was perfect, or yep, I've got it all figured out. I'm exactly what you're talking about. If I was standing before them, this group of 1,000 fathers, I would tell them a secret, and I'm going to tell you. Here's the secret. Nobody gets it right. Not one. I've met a lot of fathers, I've met a lot of dads, and I would hold up many as good examples, including my own. But I never met a father who was perfect. I never met one that could look back on his fatherhood and say, yep, I feel pretty good about it. It was always something. He said, no, I don't think I did it right. My own father was one that would be, if he was alive today, he would tell you the very same words I'm telling you right now. So maybe I should upgrade what I said earlier. There are a lot of bad fathers and a lot of imperfect good ones. Because you see, Romans 3:23 also applies to dads. For all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. That includes dads. I don't want to make light of the mistakes of fathers. In fact, I Since a father is in a power position, you might even argue his mistakes have bigger consequences. But one of the best things that my dad ever taught me was that he made mistakes. But that wasn't as important as what he taught me right after that. Good fathers face their mistakes and then get back up and try again. I'll share a specific story with you. My dad would often tell this story. He came home and he was a grouch. That's what he'd tell you. And I kind of remember this. My memory's not so great, but I remember it pretty well. He was involved in a business that was not going so well, and like all of us can appreciate, things were not going well at work, and he was mad at people at work. And so he got home and he fell into the trap. He's in his mind probably didn't process this exactly this way, but what he was doing is, since he couldn't take it out on them, he came home and took it out on us. And so we came to dinner and sat down, and he was ready to snap at us and get after my sister and I, and he was looking for stuff that we were doing wrong, and we weren't doing anything wrong, and that aggravated him. That's how he described it. So he started doing the sit up straight. Don't spill that. He's just kind of looking for stuff. And he said he looked out across the table, and we're kind of eating our food and everything. I know this makes my dad sound horrible, but it was one of his off days. But this makes me admire him greatly. He stopped in his mind. He said, "You little dummy head." How he said it. He was my dad and I always joked around. We'd say, "You dirty rat." So he said, that's what he said in his mind. He says, you're angry at them, and you come home and take it out on them. And then he did what most dads would not do. He said, "I'm sorry." And we looked up. He said, I'm wrong. I'm angry out there. You don't deserve this. He just came out. He says, "I'm sorry." And you know what? We came to his defense. We said, "Well, Dad, you work hard, and we understand." He says, "No, I was wrong." He says he had to argue with us to prove that he was wrong because we wanted to come to his defense. He shared this with me, too, that a lot of dads, because that was a big turning point for him. He said that as a dad, that was kind of a big turning point, because a lot of dads feel like if they make mistakes, they look weak, and especially if you admit it. But I'll tell you another secret. Children know that dads make mistakes. They figure it out. So it's just best to be up front. Dad's discipline for us made a huge positive impact, but so did his apologies. This is Philippians 4:12, something we can all identify with. Philippians 4:12 says, "Not that I have already obtained it or have already become perfect, but I press on so that I may lay hold of that for which also I was laid hold of by Christ Jesus. Brethren, I do not regard myself as having laid hold of it yet. But one thing I do, forgetting what lies behind and reaching forward to what lies ahead, I press on toward the goal for the prize of the upward call of God in Christ Jesus." That was my dad's favorite verse, and I understand why. As time goes by, that he really appreciated that verse, that you never quite arrive. You see, great fathers are great, not because they're perfect, but because when they fail at being great, they get up and try to be great again. Deep down, all fathers know that they aren't what they should be, especially the great ones. I love this. Paul Harvey said this about fathers. You may remember who Paul Harvey was. He sometimes had a good way of putting things. He said, "A father never feels worthy of the worship in a child's eyes. He's never quite the hero his daughter thinks, never quite the man his son believes him to be. And this worries him sometimes. So he works too hard to try and smooth out the rough places in the road for those of his own who will follow him." One of the most powerful things about a father is the fact that souls are following him. And even though the position in his hands does not shine perfectly bright, he's doing his best that he can. But one of the best things an imperfect father can do is lead those souls to the Father who is perfect. Let's read a verse. This is how a perfect father is described. In Joshua 1:9. I'm going to read just a few verses here describing fathers. Joshua 1:9 is talking about God, our perfect Father. Have I not commanded you, be strong and courageous, do not tremble or be dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. I think all of us have the memory of someone who was bigger than us, a father-like figure, but everything was okay because he was standing next to us. God is a Father who will be with us if we let him be with us. Psalm 103, verse 13. This is the verse I mentioned earlier. Here's the whole verse. Psalm 103, verse 13. Just as a father has compassion on his children, so the Lord has compassion on those who fear him. He's that Father. Our God is a Father of compassion. And then Deuteronomy 1:29. This is the verse that Brent read for us. And notice the description of this man as a father, and God is comparing himself to this particular one. Deuteronomy 1:29. Then I said to you, do not be shocked nor fear them. The Lord your God who goes before you will himself fight on your behalf, just as he did for you in Egypt before your eyes, and in the wilderness where you saw how the Lord your God carried you, just as a man carries his son in all the way which you have walked until you came to this place. God is a Father who will carry you. When you see a father doing it right and being a good father, that can tell you what God is like. When you see a father not doing it right, being a bad father, even in his mistakes, if he wants, God can help him be a good father even then. Fathers are powerful and wonderful. Fathers make mistakes, but the best thing a father can do is lead the way to the Father who will help you survive your own mistakes. And one thing we should always keep in mind before we close is that God is eager to be your Father, but only if you want him to be. By being baptized through his Son, you become his son or his daughter, and you can face life as a new person. We're singing this song to encourage people to make a decision. If you have not been baptized, we encourage you to do this, to go to your Father. He will forgive you, he will bless you, and he will carry you. Pray you'll think about this while we stand together and sing.